Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be able to speak to your AGM today. I want to thank John and to everyone in DFI for the kind invitation. It's a real honour to be able to speak with an organisation that does so much good work. DFI does a particularly great job in marshalling the views of member organisations and using that information to inform and engage with politicians in a really constructive manner. I hope your meeting goes well today, and I'm very happy to address you on a topic and a theme of real importance: implementing the UN CRPD in the COVID-19 climate. Since I'm Minister for a new department and an expanded department, I'd like to take the time to set out a little bit about how I see this department functioning, and particularly its approach to the issue of disability. For me, human rights are absolutely core in what this department is about. Not merely having those rights written in a policy document or in a piece of legislation, but making them meaningful, making them real in people's day-to-day lives. Because so many of the groups within the wider remit of this department historically have been marginalised or have been excluded from public policy, I want to bring all of their voices to the Cabinet table. Part of doing this effectively is hearing directly from those affected by the decisions being made across government. One person from the disability sector put it to me as simply as, "Talk with us about how we live our lives." And this is the approach I want to bring to all elements of the department, from children to people with disabilities, to those living in direct provision, to members of the travelling community. And this approach is particularly relevant to people with disabilities who for so long were told rather than asked how they should live their lives. That engagement is also about recognising that disability rights and disability policy are not just health matters. People with disabilities are not one single homogenous group. They can be mothers, they can be refugees, they can be children, they can be LGBTI+, and so much more, with all the different senses of identity and complexity which that entails. And by bringing responsibility for the delivery of disability services from the Department of Health, and bringing responsibility for equality from the Department of Justice, in our new department, we're taking a wider view of the lives of people with disabilities. And I'd like to say at the outset how absolutely delighted I am that Minister Rabbitte is the Minister for State for Disabilities. Anne and I are working very closely together on the disability brief. The transfer of functions out of the Department of Health is extremely complex in the area of disability, and our goal is to have this completed by the end of this year. Along with our colleagues in government, we are keenly aware that the COVID-19 pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on people with disabilities. There have been high numbers of COVID-19 clusters in residential care facilities and indeed high mortality rates in some centres. Persons with disabilities have also been adversely affected by the closure of schools, the temporary suspension of services such as respite, and the reduction of others such as home support and adult day services. Beyond the impact on both specialist services and on voluntary supports, persons with disabilities have also experienced challenges in their daily lives. What has been clear to me in the meetings I've had since taking on this role is firstly the profound and in many cases devastating impact the pandemic has had, and secondly that services, carers, voluntary groups, they've all gone above and beyond during the COVID restrictions. And I think it's really important that I acknowledge and I pay tribute to everybody who's been working in the disability sector across this very difficult period of time. The COVID-19 experience has absolutely underlined the importance of long-term planning and the need to really accelerate progress across a range of areas. It is in this context that the government and its agencies will be advancing the implementation of the UN CRPD as a priority. When Ireland signed up to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, it was a watershed moment. But it can only be truly significant if we make real that rights-based approach. And it is the job of this department to ensure that public services and public policy are accessible to everyone in Ireland. While we will have the coordinating role, driving the realisation of rights has to be something that is done across every single government department and state agency. And with the Dáil returning to work this week, Minister Rabbitte and I, we have written jointly to both the Ceann Comhairle and the Chief Whip requesting that they swiftly reconvene the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Disability. The programme for government contains a range of specific and tangible commitments related to progressing implementation of the CRPD that underscore the need for a whole of government coordination and implementation. One of these commitments is the resourcing of the National Disability Inclusion Strategy 2017 to 21, which provides a mechanism for joined up working to deliver on Ireland's commitments to implementing the UN CRPD. The steering group for the strategy, of which DFI is a member, has an important role in guiding progress in this area, and I'm aware that a member of the DFI team is on the NDIS steering group in a personal capacity. Recently, the group carried out a mid-term review of the strategy that examined two key elements. Firstly, how the strategy is aligned with the articles of the Convention, and secondly, how the strategy could be revised and built upon in order to continue progressive realisation of the aims of the Convention. Arising from the mid-term review, the Department of Justice and Equality committed to developing a CRPD implementation plan that will include monitoring structures and metrics as appropriate. As we continue to work at implementing the Convention, it is absolutely vital that the government hears the voices of persons with lived experience of disability. And that is why we're establishing a disability participation and consultation network as a priority. And you'll be aware that my colleague Minister Anne Rabbitte, announced the establishment of this network in August. The aim is to provide a new opportunity for persons with disabilities to be involved in the development of policy and legislation. And I am delighted that funding has been made available for organisations representing persons with disabilities or with experience in disability to administer the network, and grants will also be made available to DPOs. One of the network's first tasks will be to organise consultations for Ireland's first state report to the UN on our progress in implementing the Convention. Another important step to realising full implementation of the Convention is the commencement of the Assisted Decision-Making Capacity Act 2015 in tandem with the establishment of a fully operational decision support service. The programme for government commits to the commencement of the AGM Act and also the abolition of wardships. The Department of Justice and Equality, in conjunction with the DSS, the Mental Health Commission and other stakeholders, have agreed an implementation plan which anticipates the full implementation and full commencement of the DSS service by mid-2022. It is the role of the DSS to put in place the necessary infrastructure to support the full commencement of the AGM Act, and work is progressing as quickly as possible. Its preparations are being put in place under the oversight of the steering group. When they are completed, they will allow for commencement orders for the main operative provisions of the 2015 Act to be made. A statistic that I know the Disability Federation's own campaigning has very much focused on is the proportion of people who have disabilities living in consistent poverty, and that now stands at a very concerning 24%. Poverty robs life chances wherever it exists, and the single largest influencer of consistent poverty is access to work. It's for that reason that, as we hope to recover from COVID-19, the government is focused on getting people back to work, including people with disabilities. Again, the programme for government contains a number of very specific commitments in this regard. Work has already begun on an awareness and support programme for employers to support recruitment and retention of persons with disabilities, and we hope to launch that later this year. I also have been discussing with my officials what further supports we can put in place. In particular, I want to look how this department can work with the Department of Further and Higher Education, with the Department for Employment and Social Protection, and also with the Department for Education to help persons with disabilities in that transition from secondary education to third level, further education, or into employment. In conclusion, I really hope that what you've heard from myself and from Minister Rabbitte today provides assurance that this government remains committed to improving the lives of people with disabilities, and that this is an absolute priority for us. The implementation of the UN CRPD is key in this regard. We want to see effective structures which allow persons with disabilities fulfil their rights. This extends from the houses of the Oireachtas to the courts, right throughout each individual's day-to-day lives. I'm determined that this new department, rooted in human rights and in social justice, will drive these changes from government, and I look forward to working with the DFI in the realisation of those rights. So thanks again for the invitation to speak with you today, and I look forward to continuing to working with you all in the future.